Hi everyone. Today's seminar will focus on the rare neurological syndrome called Landau-Kleffner Syndrome, or LKS. Prior to beginning my research for this seminar, I had not heard of the syndrome before, but became interested in it due to the fact that the children can be developing normally prior to beginning to show signs and symptoms of the syndrome. My son also experienced a seizure about a year ago, so I have some personal connection to these issues. My presentation will consist of a brief overview of the syndrome and some of its possible causes. I will then move on to show a short clip of a video of an adolescent who has been working to overcome the challenges of LKS. The second part of the seminar will focus on the causes of the syndrome, how families and students can be supported and meet their full potential. I will conclude by highlighting some discussion questions that I feel would be interesting to go over during the online chat portion of the seminar. I hope you find the seminar to be interesting and helpful. Thank you for your time and contributions to the online discussion. Landau-Kleffner syndrome can be defined as a rare childhood neurological disorder just characterized by the sudden or gradual development of aphasia, which is the inability to understand or express language, and an abnormal electroencephalogram, or EEG. To continue on from the definition, just a brief overview of the syndrome. This is very rare childhood neurological disorder. There's really unsure about how many kids are impacted by this syndrome, but it is quite rare. Students develop aphasia, in which they cannot understand or express language for that short period of time, and it's an abnormal electroencephalogram. The parts of the brain that are generally impacted are those that control speech and comprehend language. So that's what becomes impacted with these students. Generally impacts children from the ages of 5 to 7, and they really just begin to lose their language for no apparent reason. A common side effect, or another common difficulty with this syndrome, is that the kids also have many seizures. About 70% of the people that are impacted have seizures that correspond with the syndrome. And it's generally misdiagnosed by numerous other learning exceptionalities that are also brought up in these seminars. As I stated before, one of the main issues with LKS is the loss of language comprehension, in which children are no longer can understand the language that's being spoken to them. Seizures are very common as well, and a large issue that needs to be dealt with. After the ages of 5 to 7, one of the outstanding issues is the permanent language disorders that are developed by these children, and how they really have a lot of difficulties in these areas. There can be relapses with the issues that I've spoken about before, and just a general loss of speech where the kids can no longer talk. Another common issue is attention deficit problems, where the kids will have a lot of trouble focusing in the classroom, mostly because of probably their lack of comprehension in what's actually being talked about within the classroom. I'll now move on to talk about some of the behavioral characteristics that you might see in the classroom and with a student with LKS. Some of the behavioral characteristics that you might see in the classroom with these students are pretty logical and what you might expect. The students would have a lot of trouble responding to a specific question or a specific instruction that's given to them, mostly because of their lack of comprehension of what's being talked about. They can be seen as being hyperactive, also having temper outbursts, where they will just have an outburst, mostly I would assume due to their frustration with what's going on in the classroom and with their challenges that they're experiencing. This would probably then lead to the withdrawn behaviors that a lot of teachers and professionals will speak about, where the students will seem disengaged with what's being talked about. And as I stated earlier on in the seminar, that about 70% of students with LKS will also experience seizures quite regularly. So as you move on to the next slide, if you just want to click play on the YouTube video there, it's just a clip of that a girl has posted to YouTube, and you can kind of see some of the issues that she has with her speech and with her language. But pretty neat video, because she's actually been posting to YouTube to try to overcome some of these challenges and to bring light to the syndrome and how it has impacted her life.
Hi. It's Anina. I'm okay. I got dressed today, and I got myself cleaned up today, and I went to my mom's computer for start to play cooking games a little bit before my mom working a new job it's a class school, and I went to paint and I typed in and I weren't them, and really weren't them, and I weren't them, and I go on some read on YouTube as I go in the read on YouTube, and I watch E90 911, and I watch Super 90, and I watch the Super 90, and I listen. Deaf Clock is called laser deaf Canadian sentence, and I felt great today.
Oh, I'm happy.
Goodbye.
I'm glad.
See you later.
You're done? Okay.
So the causes of LKS are still quite unknown. It is a very rare disorder that impacts kids, but there's a lot that's yet to be determined about it. Some initial ideas are that it could be due to a focal brain lesion or congenital malformation. It could also have to do with a cyst in the brain, or even a brain tumor that could begin to lead to the loss of language, and also to the impacts with the seizures and whatnot. So some of the ways that parents and their children cope with LKS are through taking certain medication. The medications are kind of very similar to what a child with epilepsy would take. So the student could be prescribed anticonvulsants or corticosteroids. Obviously, a very common way to work on their language skills is through speech therapy, to help them gain back that language that they had lost. That's something that I'll speak to later on in the seminar as well. One surgical technique that has been used at times for epilepsy is a multiple subtalar transection. So if these seizures occur in a part of the brain that cannot be removed safely, this is seen as an alternative. It's a surgery where a surgeon will make a series of shallow cuts or transections into the brain's cerebral cortex. And these cuts are thought to interrupt some of the fibers that connect neighboring parts of the brain, but they do not appear to cause long-lasting impairments in the critical function of these areas. So the idea here is that they can help to reduce or eliminate the seizures that arise from these areas of the cerebral cortex. It has been successful, and for some children with LKS, at least for a limited time. If a child is diagnosed with LKS, parents can seek out support from a few different locations. Within Canada, they could seek out help from the Organization of Speech and Language Audiology Canada. Epilepsy Canada is also a useful resource. The Canadian Organization for Rare Disorders can also be contacted, or Sick Kids here in Toronto. So all of these organizations have websites as well that have useful information and resources that these parents can utilize to help support their children, or specific people or organizations that they can contact to find additional support. So from the seminars so far, you probably have determined that the school or the community would play a large part in helping to support a child with LKS. The community can provide them with the speech and the language therapy that they may need, or the augmented and alternative communication devices that would help to support them. These students would also at times need to develop sign language skills, which could be done within the community, or have people within the community understand their use of sign language. Within the school, special education classes would be crucial to help develop their language skills and provide them with a comfortable location to learn. Classroom helpers would maybe be necessary within the school, and especially would be especially important for teachers to further develop their education with LKS and their understanding of how to best support a student who comes into the classroom with these challenges. I'll next move on to talk about some educational strategies that teachers could utilize within the classroom. So if a student is come into a classroom with LKS or develops LKS while they're at a school, it will be essential for them to have access to augmented or alternative communication devices so that they can ensure that they are understood. Some knowledge of sign language could be helpful, especially if the student begins to use that as their form of communication. Students with LKS are sometimes placed into special education classes, so that their availability within a school would be necessary, or even access to a classroom helper or a resource teacher who could support a student within the traditional classroom. Assistive technology or computer programs would be helpful within a classroom to help provide students with ways to further develop their language skills, but also communicate their understanding. And similar to a student with ESL, visual cues within a classroom would be a great strategy to use to help support students. So lots of visuals around the classroom, possibly the use of a smartboard when giving instructions, so that students can fully comprehend what's being asked of them or what's being taught to them. So if you are teaching a student with LKS, it would be really important for you to be understanding of the difficulties that they are experiencing and that their family has experienced due to the sudden loss of the language. Be really important to educate yourself about the condition, and I will provide some resources at the end of this seminar that can help better educate teachers about this condition and how to support these students. It will be really important for teachers to account for the language problems that these students will experience and kind of how to overcome them, and also to prepare for some of the behavioral issues that I spoke about earlier on in the seminar, because those are generally also correspond with the syndrome and accompany it. And lastly, I'll conclude the seminar by talking about how we can help these students reach their full potential within the classroom and in the community in general. So we can help a student with LKS reach their full potential by doing numerous things. One thing that would be really important is the anti-epileptic medicine that they could be taking to help control the seizures, to ensure that the symptoms do not worsen. it would be really important to, with that, as with any student, but especially a student with LKS, it would be really important to have a supportive team approach. It should be really ensuring that there's a strong communication between the family of the child, also the special education teachers within a school, to ensure that everyone's is on the same page and working together. It would be really important to work to reestablish some of the communication skills. It would probably be difficult to bring the student back to where they were prior to their diagnosis, but we really want to reestablish the communication skills as quickly as possible so that they can get back, so that they can begin learning again. Speech and language therapy would be essential for these students to help develop these areas, and providing them with some of the assistive technology that we spoke to earlier, or online resources that are available for these students. And access to special education classes would also help the student reach their full potential. So just to conclude, here are some of the online resources and references that I used to help support this seminar. So the following websites were very helpful: the Epilepsy Foundation, the National Organization for Rare Disorders, the Sick Kids website, and the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke website. So I found all these sources to be very helpful and provided me with some information about the disorder and how to better support students or children who have the Landau-Kleffner syndrome. Thank you very much for listening to this seminar. I hope you found it to be informative and interesting. I thought it might be good to highlight 4 discussion questions that we could focus on for the online chat portion. But feel free to discuss anything or ask any questions that you may still have about the syndrome. See you in the chat room.